Okay, so I will switch to English now. So Łukasz told me that it would be nice to maybe share some of my institutional experiences in Germany. So of course I'm eager to do it, and I gave my talk this title towards slow curating because I'm made a kind of a so-called career path from a bigger institution to a very small institution, and I have to say I really like small art institutions. I think there is something about them that makes working there more satisfying and pleasant, and maybe the pace of work is also slower, and we also can, I think, then influence more how we work because we have a small structure and it's much more manageable than a bigger institution. So I first, actually my main background is not art or art history but philosophy. I wanted to be an academic philosopher. I studied philosophy in Krakow for almost 10 years. I also did PhD studies in philosophy, but I never completed my PhD because I started to curate at Bunkier Sztuki in Krakow. And I kind of realized that this is what I want to do, so I still have this unfinished PhD. I don't know, maybe I should do some art project about it, write it collectively with some other people. I don't know, I'm thinking about it. So I started my activities in the art field at Bunkier Sztuki, and I was at the time when I was employed there, we had a division. There was a division between the curatorial and educational department, and I started to work in educational department. And very quickly I had my own project, and my half-time job turned into a full-time job. And my first project was called After Capitalism. It was a kind of a response to the economic crisis, and also I partly also kind of referred to a bit to my previous studies, which were studies in economics in Poznań. I have actually a BA in economics, so that's how everything started. And I was born in Szczecin. Okay, maybe it's a bit messy, but this is my hometown. So I worked at Bunkier Sztuki from approximately the end of 2011 until mid-2016, with a break where I studied curating in Amsterdam at the Apple Arts Center. Definitely these curatorial studies very much influenced my professional but also personal life, because I was in a group of 6 girls and we became close friends, and it was a kind of unexpected result of my studies, which was of course great. And then I was at Bunkier Sztuki, and I kind of had this feeling that my work was going quite well, but I had a feeling that maybe I would like to work in a smaller institution, and I had this observation that these big art institutions, sometimes they kind of turn a little bit against artists and against art, and that they not always can accommodate the artistic process, I would say. So the bigger institution it is, the less flexible it is, and the more importance it puts to procedures and all the working schemes, what you have to do when you want to do an exhibition and all these things. And I had an impression that sometimes, this institutional structure has to kind of sustain itself, so it needs this predictability. So it has to be predictable what happens there. And if you have many employees, then of course you need all these procedures, and you have to deliver everything on time and so on. Because if it's not, then you create a mess and people hate you. But artists not always want to work like that, And even now I have an impression that I'm scared if artists too much want to work like that. Maybe it's not sometimes a good sign. And I thought that. Sometimes I was in this position where I had to, either I allowed the artist to change the project, and then my colleagues, for example, in PR department would hate me, or I told the artist that sorry, but this has to stay like that, and you shouldn't do any more changes. We need the text and so on. And then I had a feeling that I'm not actually supporting this person in the way I should. So that was my feeling, and I think it was in the end of 2015 or in the beginning of 2016, I saw a job announcement in Cologne. I was actually not so much looking for a job, but I kind of abroad. I was not considering it so much, but I had all these thoughts about working in a kind of a mid-scale art institution. Bunkier Sztuki had around 30 employees at the time, I think. And this job was a job of at the institution in Cologne called Akademie der Künste der Welt, Academy of the Arts of the World. This is the website of this. Oh no, not this. This is the website of this institution, and at that time, the artistic director of this institution was Ekaterina Degot, who works very often in team with David Rief. I don't know if you know them. He's not one member now. Okay, he's not on the website. But anyway, during my curatorial studies, I visited the first edition of triennial in Bergen called Bergen Assembly, and I together with my group, with my student group, and we were completely fascinated by the exhibition that Ekaterina and David curated there. It was called Monday Begins on Saturday, something like that, and it was based on a short story by Strugatsky brothers about very weird institutes that operate in some country, and they had very funny names like Institute for Love and Leg thereof, and so on, and they were and it was a little bit the whole triennial was dedicated to artistic research, but it was very playful, and the different institutions in the city of Bergen were turned into these funny institutes from the short story, and there were little exhibitions there, and I kind of thought that it's a very interesting approach to curating. Also, this biennial was also quite, I would say, political, but there was still a lot of playfulness there. So they kind of after this biennial, they were on my list of people that I would ever like to work with. I don't know if you have such a list. It's usually not a very long list. So when I saw that I could apply for this job and I could work with them, I decided to do it. And I got the job. So mid-2016 I moved to Cologne from Kraków, which was to some extent it was not easy, and because of course I lived in Kraków for 15 years and I have lots of friends there, and I have lots of long-term friendships in this city, so it was a kind of I basically had to start from the very beginning in another city. So I'm not a big fan of like this moving and changing cities. I think it's a kind of I don't know how, it's like a disease of contemporary times, but it's of course partly caused by the system of capitalism that we have to do this. But I think it's very it destroys our roots and our kind of a psychological base of our life, I think. So I hope I will not have to move anymore to another city. Maybe move back, maybe this could be an option. So anyway, I started to work at the academy, and to tell you a little bit more about this institution, it's still active, so if you ever come to Cologne, you can definitely visit them and attend their program. It's a quite unusual institution that was created in 2012, so it's relatively young, and it's not any kind of educational institution in terms of it's not like a real academy. It's called academy, but because the model that is partly employed there is this model of academies like French Academy or Academy of the Arts in Berlin. And these academies that are like I don't know if we also have it in Poland. It's like an association of scholars or writers, and they are to become a member of the academy. It's like one of the most prestigious things that you can have in your life, to be invited to be member of this academy. And then these institutions support your work, and I remember I think I remember Voltaire wanted to become a member of the French Academy, and they didn't want him. It was a kind of a tragedy for him, or things like that. So these academies have this kind of a long tradition in Europe, and but they are usually national academies. Yeah, you have French Academy, German Academy, Polish Academy of Science. Yeah, so they have this national character. And in Cologne, the idea was to create an international academy to kind of counter this kind of nation thinking in terms of the category of nation. The whole institution was actually initiated by a writer of Iranian origin, Navid Kermani, who is quite influential, especially in leftist circles in Germany. I once even read a text that he will be the next chancellor, but I think it was a few years ago. So he was very influential, and he lives in Cologne, and he initiated this institution. And the idea was that it's dedicated to all arts, not only visual arts, and that it kind of gathers established artists and art theorists from all over the world. So here you have, for example, a list of members of the academy. You have Kader Atia, I'm sure you recognize some names here. Olivier Marbeuf, Lemmy Bonifacio, great New Zealand choreographer. These members, and at the very beginning, this institution should operate in such a way that the program was supposed to be created by the members. So they were coming to Cologne, they were doing residencies and projects in Cologne, but very quickly the institution realized, and the audience, that it's not such a good model, because the projects were kind of random in terms of themes. It was not any kind of a coherent program. So the members decided that they will select one of them who will become an artistic director of this institution. Ekaterina Degot at some point became this director. If we are talking about my institutional experiences, it's also Academy also actually has two directors, because there is this artistic director selected by the members, but there is also a CEO, kind of an administrative director, that is selected by the board of the Academy. And in the board of the Academy, you have politicians from different political parties in Cologne. You don't have any art experts there. And this caused a crisis in the existence of these institutions, actually. But I will tell you later about it. But anyway, there are these two directors that are at the same level, and from my experience, it's really not a good model for an art institution. It's you cannot clearly separate curatorial tasks from administrative tasks, and usually there will be a tension between two of them. I don't know if you have been to the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. They had this model for a while, and it kind of disrupted the whole institution. Several directors left. I would say it's a kind of a neoliberal institutional model whose goal is actually to limit the autonomy of the artistic director through this introduction of this manager, who is kind of supposed to control the artistic director. There is also another model that I encountered in the last years. It was employed in Extra City in Antwerp, very interesting art institution, where the board selected just administrative director, who is then working with curators. This is also very bad model, and last year 3 curators that were working there left and wrote a kind of an open letter that was clearly a rejection of this institutional structure. But anyway, this model that Academy has is not the best one, but still the institution operates. And concerning the profile of the Academy, now the director of the Academy is a documentary filmmaker, Madhusri Dutta from India. I would say with each artistic director, of course, this institution kind of changes its profile a little bit, but still it is an institution that has very international program, and one of its goals is really to kind of question this dominant, I would say, streams of thoughts in the art world, especially this concentration on the Western artists or from North America. So we were invited we were doing a really global research, and we were inviting lots of artists from other continents to Cologne. The thematic scope that Ekaterina kind of also introduced and established is, I would say, also quite political. We had lots of programs dedicated to current political issues, for example, the old left and the new right, about the rise of fascism, had a program on populism, and the institution is also dealing a lot with different issues related to migration, to a so-called multicultural society. The program is really very international. But at some point in the history of this institution, this program for the Cologne politicians became too international, and the budget of the institution was cut by 40%. Now it was a kind of a rapid, it was a kind of a quick decision. There was no, it was not like a gradual cut, but it was employed immediately. The institution survived because it had some savings from the first years when it had a budget, and it didn't spend all of this budget because it was in this process of constructing itself. But it was a kind of a clear sign that the objections that we were receiving is that we are not local enough, although the main intention with which this institution was created was to become extremely international. And that we have too many events in English, only in English. So we had lots of discussions after that about this. I think there also maybe some cultural differences played a role, and Ekaterina Degot is a very charismatic curator and sometimes very direct, and this was sometimes maybe not so easy to swallow for people that love small talk, like local politicians. Yeah, the program was also very intellectual, so there were many symposiums, many research projects, and I would say maybe our audience actually was not just art scene of Cologne, like actually not so many artists from Cologne, but more people that are interested in some political or sociological issues. But now with the arrival of the new director, the budget increased, so it's clearly a kind of also related to the personality of the director, but also Academy had a big project with local institutions, so that kind of saved, I think, partly the institution. So it kind of can still continue to exist, because if this 40% cut would be kind of sustained, probably the institution would need to close at some point, because it would not be able to fulfill its international agenda, which is of course quite expensive, to fly people over from Philippines or Australia and so on. Yeah, so I started, and one I forgot to say that a very important topic in this institution is the history and legacy of colonialism. So we were dealing a lot. I actually had to do a kind of a quick course in post-colonial theory when I arrived in Cologne, and I was a bit shocked that during my studies in philosophy, we read nothing from this, text. So I had to kind of catch up, which was of course great, but it also kind of showed me how actually restricted my education was in Poland and partly in Germany as well. So we were doing also a lot of programs related to that. We were also dealing with German colonialism, and this was, for example, something that was very difficult to swallow for the local politicians. Now it's changing, but it was relatively recently that there was, for example, a big exhibition in the historical museum in Berlin that had this title, German Colonialism. It was I think like 2 or 3 years ago. So this theme was, when the academy started to talk about this, it's not that it was such a popular theme in Germany, and the knowledge about the existence of German colonies. I wanted to show you that maybe German colonial, so in the blue you have the German colonies. Of course, Germany was not such a colonial power like Great Britain or France, but still there were quite many colonies, and there were some very dark moments, like a massacre of Herero people in Africa, for example. But this is also the agenda of this institution, to talk about these issues. Check how much time I have. Probably not so much. Okay. 10 minutes. Okay. During my stay at the academy, I was involved in several projects. We had this seasonal kind of a program called Pluriversale, always several months, that I was involved in. I was trying to also work with performance art a lot. We had performance nights. We produced a new performance of Michael Portnoy called Character Assassination, where in this performance, the artist, we had a group of volunteers that gave the artist access to their Facebook accounts, and during the performance, the artist did this character assassination. I don't know if you are familiar with this term. It's basically like publicly spreading partly fictitious information about you and destroying your public image. So the artist generated a lot of gossips that were related to, they were then in the audience, so it was in the convention of a TV show. And he created a lot of fictitious information about the participants of this performance, and was using their Facebook images. And I didn't know, but there are some companies that they can make any movie you want. So there were like some people from Africa telling that some of our participants are maintaining some businesses there, and they don't treat people well, and it looked very convincing, you know. So it was also about this so-called fake news phenomenon. Yeah, we had several collaborations with also art schools, for example, with Dutch Art Institute, and I started a reading group that continues until now, and was always tied to the program of the academy. I mean, in general, a big fan of reading groups, and in my new institution I also started one. It's simple format, and it always works. I think I never had a bad reading group meeting. Just had one yesterday in my institution, and was also very, very nice. And this is a project that also Jan Sowa very actively participates in, Perverse Decolonization, a project dedicated to the crisis of post-colonial studies, the rise of nationalisms, the appropriation of some post-colonial approaches by the conservative politicians and theorists. This project had stations in different countries. There were seminars in Israel, in US, in Poland, and in Germany, in Hong Kong. This project will now end with a publication, which is a kind of a criticism of identity politics. Yes. So this is okay. So this is the academy, and now I tell you a little bit about my current institution, which is a small center for contemporary art called Temporary Gallery. We are located in the city center of Cologne, with around 250 square meters of exhibition space, and basically again I had this situation that there was an open call, and I was sure that I want to, the next step for me is to get more autonomy, because of course in all these bigger institutions, if you are not the boss, then you always have this boss, and you have to negotiate all your ideas with this person, and sometimes you will get yes, but many times you will of course get a no. So I really felt that, okay, now I am ready for something else, and now I want to be the boss, and now I want to exploit and blame and Joking, of course. So I applied for the I applied to become a director of temporary gallery, and I was successful. And now I work in a very small academy. Had around 10 employees. Yeah, so Bunkier Sztuki 30, academy 10, and now I have 1 employee that works half time. So we are very, very small. But actually it works quite well. Of course, we cannot do everything. We have to be very careful with planning because we have to execute everything by ourselves. But we also have a total autonomy. We have a very good board. Temporary gallery is actually a Kunstverein. I don't know if you are familiar with this form of a Kunstverein. It's a very old organizational form in German. It's like an association of art lovers, art fans, and in Germany there are, I think, more than 200 Kunstvereine. Some of them are very, very small and people work there as volunteers, but some of them are quite big and have staff. So we also have members. It's possible to become our member. You pay a membership, and we have we are supported by the city of Cologne. Actually, our roots are related to commercial art market because at the beginning the name of the institution was Rental Gallery, and it was an initiative of several commercial galleries in Cologne that created this space in order to rent it to other galleries from outside of the city. And there were some quite prestigious commercial galleries exhibiting there. So, but then after a few years, it was clear that this model is not working, and the board decided it would be just a non-profit art space. And in 2012, there was an open call announced by the city of Cologne to run a center of contemporary art, and Temporary Gallery won this. So we got kind of a stable funding. Unfortunately, this funding covers only our running costs, so for all our program we have to apply for grants. But so far it's the institution was quite successful, but of course it is a problem because it's generates a lot of additional work with application and then all the financial reports and other types of reports that you have to do. Yeah, what else can I say? It's really I have to say my life became less intense because I have my little office. I have only this one person. I don't have this group of people that I have to communicate. Or in the bigger institutions, I had to write a lot of emails, and the kind of a big thing was communication within the team. So now I have this extremely small team. So there is much less time that I spend on this communication. This of course means that I have to do many more things by myself, which sometimes is tough, I would say. But in general, I think I'm in a kind of a slower mode than before, and I really enjoy it. Concerning the program, I don't know if I have time now, but just to 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Concerning the program, I cannot do more than 3 exhibitions a year for our whole space, so I have to be very careful in making choices. My first exhibition was a kind of a curatorial experiment, and it was called Heart of an Old Crocodile Exploding Over a Small Town. And it was a group, the title of the exhibition comes from this painting. It's a painting by a young Belgian painter, and it represents exactly what is shown in the title. You have the crocodile whose heart is exploding, and you have this small town where people are trying to make friends with crocodiles. This whole exhibition was kind of inspired by the paintings of this guy. And let me show you some more photographs. And it was in the end a group show because I selected several other artists whose works were kind of matching the works of Bram de Munter. And in the end, this kind of a solo exhibition of painting turned into a bigger group show with several interrelated themes. So it was also interesting for me how to curate when you don't have a theory, you don't have a theme, but you have a group of artworks, and they are the kind of a base, and from which you create the exhibition. So the process actually of working on this was very intuitive, and sometimes I was not fully aware of why I'm selecting a particular artwork to be in this exhibition, and only later I understood. So I would say it was partly also an artistic process. And in the end, what we got an exhibition with several interrelated themes. So there were like several different paths that you could follow. I also worked with Mateusz Okoński on the exhibition design. So you can see that we this gallery is a kind of a more traditional white cube. So people that were entering this exhibition were shocked with what we did. But we were also interested in having different wall colors, because we think that this type of painting doesn't actually look good on the white walls. We collaborated with a very interesting institution in Cologne that is, it's called Cat 18, and it's an institution with artist studios for mentally disabled artists. And we had these amazing sons of one of them who looks like tigers or crocodiles, and they have like penises instead of their noses and so on. So it was really a great collaboration. And we created a kind of a very sensual exhibition space that kind of encourages you. It's kind of less intimidating, I think, than the traditional white cube, and invites you to spend more time in the institution. And so if you would be interested, you can find more information about it online. So this is something that I really would like to continue in future, to work like this with the space. The exhibition that we have now is an exhibition by Rim Al-Kadhi, who is an artist who was her roots are in Iraq, and it's called Majnun Field, and it refers to oil fields in Iraq and the extreme contamination and exploitation of earth that happens there. But as you see, it's not any kind of a report on what's going on in Iraq. It's a quite poetic exhibition, quite emotional, and also there is a lot of, I think, hope in it. So I can tell, if someone will be more interested, I can tell you more about it. As I'm a big fan of TV series, I also have a separate project on TV series and artists that work with the format of a TV series. So we have screenings and 3 artists from Poland, Mateusz Okoński, Marta Sala, and Dominika Szczołba-Żegleń. They created this funny installation inspired by American TV series from 80s and 90s. So we have a chair that's called Laura Palmer and Alexis from the Dynasty and so on, and it's basically the area for our visitors. So we also do events, and people can freely use this furniture, and this is also one of my ways of kind of making this space of the art institution a little bit more relaxed. The big curtain that you see was made, is also a permanent part of our space, and was created. It's a gigantic snake. It was also created by Berber Lange from this atelier house Cat 18, and it's a protective animal. So it has this kind of a ritualistic meaning, and its function is to protect our institution. So it spreads in the exhibition space. And just to finish, I'm also another project that I'm involved in, and it also took part at the Academy, and I hope to bring it to Cologne, to Temporary Gallery. It's now on view in Warsaw as part of the Warsaw Biennial. It's called Floraphilia, and it's a project on the interrelations between colonialism, plants, and botany. And it's a project about history of botanical gardens, how they were involved in botanical project, in colonial project. What you see here is the first exhibition of this project that was called Floraphilia Plants as Archives. And I also worked with Mateusz Okoński concerning exhibition design. We covered everything in the gallery's space in Cologne. So we called this a guilty white cube, because it was, Cologne has this kind of a terrible history of exploitation, slavery, and so on. we're using, showing also some archival materials related to, for example, botanical gardens created by Germans in their colonies, and the collection of cotton. And it was basically about exhibition more related to history of colonialism, I would say, but we also had works of Teresa Murak, for example, on it, as a kind of this performance that for sure you know that is kind of a that she did with this big cloth made of plants, and it was considered to be a political manifesto in the streets of Warsaw. This is a sculpture by Candy Slin. It's called Abortifacient Flower. It's a kind of a bloody flower that produces smells of plants that were used by females to conduct abortions. Also a kind of a very interesting theme in itself, you know, how, for example, female slaves were trying to get rid of pregnancy. Yeah, and this is the exhibition design. For example, the whole exhibition text was painted on the cotton, so we're using this kind of yeah, we had a special method of putting all this paint on the wall, and we had, for example, all the exhibition labels, they were stamped on the cotton. And the second exhibition of this project is currently on view in Warsaw Biennial, Florophilia Revolution of Plants. And it's an exhibition about what can we learn from plants in terms of political activity. It's a kind of a proposal of mine. I only know one philosopher that is thinking about these things. His name is Michael Marder, but I kind of it's a kind of a thesis that I propose in this exhibition, and I found some artists that I think are in a very interesting way referring to that, to what we can learn from plants. We also have quite extensive exhibition design. We have these big tables on which we present artworks. It looks also like some kind of a space for some Masonic lodge that gathers and is inspired by plants and plants' future revolution. A big part of this exhibition is a completely surreal but also quite political installation of Hungarian artists Igor and Ivan Bukharov. So yeah, if you are in Warsaw, it's there on view until the end of December, and I hope to bring it to Cologne next year, but of course I'm applying for funding, so I don't know yet what will be the program. Yeah, I guess I will finish now, and if you have any questions concerning, you know, how the art world functions in Cologne and, you know, other institutions in Cologne, then of course let me know. It's funny that my favorite museum in Cologne is a Catholic museum. It's not that I'm so religious, but it's, I don't know, maybe it's this aesthetics that I feel kind of close to. It's very, you know, it's a very beautiful, very expensive building. And this museum juxtaposes old art with contemporary art in a very, very nice, very precise, beautiful way. So maybe it's a kind of, yeah, I'd like to encourage you to come to Cologne. And it's not only because of temporary gallery, but there are also other interesting places, of course. Yeah, so thank you. I don't know if you have time for questions. Or...
Thank you. We have time for questions. Somebody wants to ask a question?
Yeah, you can also ask in Polish and I will translate or...
I got one. What's the name of this museum which you have mentioned? Is that Catholic museum or?
It's called Columba Museum, and it's a building by this architect Petr Zumthor, if you know him, and it's an interesting because it's a kind of a part of a destroyed, bombed church are integrated into the building, and I think it's quite visible here. There is a chapel with a figure of Madonna in the ruins, it is called, because it's a figure of Madonna that survived the bombing, so it's Madonna in the ruins. Yes. But it's this kind of, you know, typical for Catholicism, showing off, you know, showing off your wealth, you know, it's like a... Yeah. You find it reactionary?
somehow the ruins of the church, let's do something with it, let's revive it. I think it's horrible.
Well, we might not like this idea, but I have to tell you that the work that they do there, in terms of exhibitions, I find it quite exciting. Yeah, I see, yes.
I have one question about your experience with working either in Polish public institution like Bunkersztuki or German one, and is there any difference that you can put up, and also concerning the funding, because maybe it's very interesting.
Can I join my question?
Yeah. What do you think about current organizational model of Bunkersztuki? It's a kind of a cartel, or I don't know what to call it. You have an art oligarch who is like conquering institutions, gathering them in a kind of cluster. I don't know.
I think it's terrible, and I want to cry, when I hear what's happening in Krakow. It's really destroying of the art institution. What I find it's terrible. It creates a kind of a monoculture. Yeah, you have now one museum, and the director of the museum gets another institution. So it's kind of destroys the pluralism of the institutional pluralism of the art world in Krakow. Yeah, and it's very sad, because it's really hard to have to establish something, to make the institution more recognizable. So if you do something like that, you stop the program. I think they will not have a program during the renovation even. You also destroy the work of people that worked there before. So I definitely I'm devastated by this. What can I say? And concerning the differences, well, I worked in different type of institutions in Poland and in Germany, so maybe it's not so easy to compare. Of course, academy, especially before the budget cut, it's an institution with quite a big budget, because the budget of academy before the cut it was around 1 million euros. Now I work in an institution whose budget is like 10 times less. Yeah, so so academy was actually quite well funded, and we could offer nice fees. Now it's a little bit worse, the situation, but as I said, the institution got some part of the money back. Concerning work, I think the working culture maybe is a little bit different, and there are good and bad sides of it. I think capitalism in Germany has a longer history than in Poland, and it kind of created a specific work culture. So people are in general nicer to each other, but maybe not always very honest. There is a kind of on the personal level, sometimes you don't know if someone really likes you or not. But I would say, the way you perform at work, the way you talk to your colleagues, it's considered to be part of your job. I think it was not always like that. Some people told me that in the 60s in Germany, people were not so nice, like now in the 50s. That it kind of, there is this, this type of labor that you have to do at work. But in general, I think it's not so bad, I think. It's a little bit easier to work, I think, if people kind of maybe keep their emotions more for themselves. There are less conflicts at work, I think, in comparison, I think, to Poland. But it's really, I think I have to be very careful in this generalization. But in general, there is a kind of a standard of niceness that makes daily work at institution easier, I would say. But on the other hand, there were some moments at work where I wish that my colleagues said something in a kind of a more decisive way, and I kind of wish that maybe, there would be more of this emotional force. So it also depends on the context. But in general, I would say, I think some people in Germany experienced me as a rather direct person, comparison to German colleagues, But now I learned, but I had like twice a situation where I had to excuse myself because someone felt offended by, something that I wrote in an email or something, and I was just kind of honest, So that's one difference. Concerning autonomy of the art institution, it's I think maybe even quite similar, actually. There were many attempts to influence the program of the academy by the local politicians, and they have their own agenda, and they they hated. I think Ekaterina once said in one interview that capitalism eats us alive, and they really didn't like it. It was like too strong, too direct, and too leftist probably also. So this, yeah, this was maybe this in this respect the situation is sometimes similar. Yeah, I don't know what else can I say. These are like maybe the main observations for now. Maybe concerning the salaries. They are also in Germany, they are very low. This is maybe something that I should say. I actually earn now less than I earn at the academy. And I have a kind of a job of my dreams, so I'm starting to think, okay, maybe I should stay there because it's a good job. It's not so stressful. I can do what I want, but maybe I should get a better side job, you know. And better side job not necessarily means art-related job. Yeah. I was recently invited to a jury of a quite prestigious film festival, and they offered me, I would have to see around 500 short movies. And when I calculated, you know, the number of hours, they would pay me below the German minimum wage. And I resigned from this jury. I worked there for a while. They were checking if they could increase my fee. They couldn't. So it's not that, you know, of course it's in general to live in Germany it's easier, I would say, in Poland because the social system is still there and so on. But the art sector is also struggling a lot, and a lot of people say that there is a kind of a right-wing wave that also touches slowly the art world, you know, the so-called, AfD, the right-wing political party. They hate contemporary art, of course. So whenever they will get to be elected and will have more power, they will be attacking art institutions for sure. And if you would like to get to know more about this, I recommend an interview with Okui and Vezor that was published on eFlux. And there he also talks about it when he was employed in Haus der Kunst, a very prestigious, rather well-funded art institution in Munich. And you know, when he was getting employed, it was not a problem that he doesn't speak German. But after a few years, it became a problem. Yeah? So it kind of changes. The mood is kind of going to the right, I would say, and some things that were not required in this phase of the opening to the international curators. Now you see that it's kind of being taken back, and we were supposed to be also more local. You know, I don't have any problem with, you know, having creating a program that balances, you know, local contributions with international ones. It's great. We should work like that. But this kind of a turn towards the local, it's also what the right-wing politicians love. They love the local, the German local, yes. So we have to be a bit careful here, I think. But yeah, in terms of money, I would say probably if I would work in a bigger institution, I would earn more, but then there is a price to pay for this, yeah. And then so I started, you know, I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's time to learn something new and do this job, be this there. To maintain this job, but I don't know, do some computer programming or stuff like that, you know. Maybe I know that it doesn't so encouraging, but maybe we should be also realistic about, you know, what's going on. So I really started to learn computer programming actually, but I also consider it partly as a curatorial project, because whenever I was doing something that was completely not related to art, it kind of resulted in some very interesting curatorial ideas. So now I'm using this online platform Coursera, and I started to do some courses in programming. So let's see how it goes, you know. But I immediately got some interesting ideas for our program. So, you know, maybe there will be like a double, you know, it will be a situation with several good results. But yeah, the economical issue, I would say this disappointed me a little bit. I thought that if I would to move to Germany, to be very honest with you, that I would really earn much more. And then I realized, okay, it's also tough in Germany, and of course it's a little bit easier. You know, you can, as an artist, you can have a half-time job, and you can maintain your artistic practice. Yeah, I don't know if it's possible in Poland. You know, I guess rather not. You know. Yes.
Because I live in Berlin, and I have a question related to this for the Polish colleagues, like you too. In institutions here that are state-funded, not private ones, do they have something like how do you say this guidelines that exist in Germany that if you receive public funding, you need to pay certain amount of money in terms of honorary, or if it's a workshop, or if it's a lecture, you know, this tabelle, because that's
You're
one
asking
question.
about Polish institutions.
Yes.
Do you mean they do you ask about the idea that
If it exists here, that's my question. Like you're obliged as an institution that receives public funding, you cannot organize an exhibition if you don't pay the artist this and this and this minimum. Right?
I think there is no like an obligation, but many Polish institutions signed a document created by an association of artists and curators, and in this document they promised to pay artist fees, and this association created a kind of a references, kind of sums of money that the artist should receive. That's at least that was the case when I was at Bunkersztuki. I don't know if something changed here. Some institutions, not all of them, yes. Yeah. In Germany, it's not obligatory, I think, from what I know. But some cities, when they give money for projects, they require you to pay artist fees.
I would say at least in Berlin, and Berlin is a city and it's its own region, there is like these guidelines, and you have to follow them. And I'm just asking this because in connection with, yes, it's true that in Germany everybody gets paid very little compared to other art scenes, but it's also true, and we should not diminish the work of the art scene to lobby the fact that everybody, if it's public money implied, you have to comply, no? With these minimum wages, which is ridiculous if you see it, but it's a minimum, no? And there's like a whole struggle behind it, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's so low. That should be the second step of the lobby fight.
Very interesting things that is happened in Cologne. I think it's also probably the case in Berlin, is that there is a kind of an association. It's called EIC Cologne. And it's an association of non-profit art spaces in Cologne. Actually, from what I know, it was the city that convinced them to unite because they wanted to talk to one partner and not to 40, art spaces. Here you have this the list of these art spaces, and it's actually something that I really like in Cologne, because you really have many of these art spaces. Yeah, you have like this artistic life is quite energetic. Of course, the level of this of exhibitions is not always so high, but I think it doesn't matter. It's this should exist, and so there are actually quite many exhibition openings, and this association. They even produce a report for the city about the state of the independent art scene in the city concerning visual arts. So they are actually they have a kind of a voice. Their report, I think it's even delivered to the city council or read there. There is like a public hearing, I think, or public procedure related to that. So and then of course they can really propose things to the city. So one thing that they are managed to really establish are stipends for artists. So there will be several stipends. I don't know how much, 10,000 euro a year maybe, and this, yeah. Yes.
Last question from Gavin.
Have we got time?
Okay, yes.
It's not really a question, it's just an observation. As you were talking, I was really struck by the connection between the scale or size of an institution and the pace of the work that can take place within it, and the valorization of slowness. I presume you're aware of the slow movement, as in like slow food as opposed to fast food, and then there's that great book, I can't remember the authors, two American academics have written The Slow Intellectual or The Slow University. I wondered if you could just say a tiny little bit, because we're not in much time, about why you think slowness inheres in small-scale operations.
I don't have any strong, opinion related to that. That's what I experienced. I think I don't know if I would defend the view that it's always like that, but I think in smaller institutions maybe we have more agency and we can, at least I feel, but I also have a good board that doesn't force me to do like 5 or 10 exhibitions in a year. Yeah, I have quite good conditions in that respect. But I feel that I can do actually less if I want. So I'm actually waiting for this moment when I will not get a grant for one of my exhibitions, and then we will turn into some kind of a research institute, and I will do like hundreds of reading groups, because they are, they cost no money. But still, but this probably also could be not such a good PR for my institution. But I think smaller institutions, but I don't know, maybe there are some smaller institutions where everyone works like crazy, yeah, but at least, I had this feeling that maybe this agency can be a little bit higher, yeah. It was, for example, at the academy, we couldn't even establish a unit of the workers' union, at the academy, and it doesn't exist there, and not everyone was convinced that we should do it, and I was trying to make it happen, and maybe if you have some kind of a representation of workers, the bigger institution, you can still influence something, but probably not a program. But so that's my experience. That for me it's easier in a smaller one. But if you know any big institutions that kind of manage to go into this direction, let me know. It's like good to know, maybe future workplaces or something.
This is a great final.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo.